Psilocybin generates psychedelic experience by disrupting the brain network. Maybe. Heat map of brain activity patterns shows profound disturbance during an individual's experience after taking psilocybin. By disturbance, they just mean it's doing not normal stuff. It's not bad. Relatively stable patterns before and after are temporarily scrambled during the trip. Researchers at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis report that psilocybin destabilizes a critical network of brain areas involved in introspective thinking. Findings provide a neurobiological explanation for the drug's mind-bending effects. People who consume, I'm already off to a great start, psilocybin-containing mushrooms, otherwise known as magic mushrooms, typically undergo a surreal experience in which their sense of space, time, and self is distorted. Advocates have long argued that under the right conditions, psychedelic experiences can create mental distress, and a smattering of scientific studies show they may be right. In this new study, the active compound is temporarily dislocating a critical network of brain areas involved in introspective thinking, such as daydreaming and remembering. Findings provide a neurobiological explanation for the drug's mind-bending effects and lay some of the groundwork for the development of psilocybin-based therapies for mental illnesses such as depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a massive effect initially, and when it's gone, a pinpoint effect remains. That's exactly what you'd want to see for a potential medicine. You wouldn't want people's brains to be obliterated for days. You also wouldn't want everything to snap back the way it was immediately. You want an effect that lasts long enough to be different. These days, we know a lot about the psychological effects and the molecular cellular effects of psilocybin, said first author Joshua S. Siegel, MD, PhD, an instructor in psychiatry. We don't know much about what happens at the level that connects the level of functional brain networks. So that gap, the team got an expert in brain imaging, and they devised a way to visualize the impact of psilocybin on individual participants' functional brain networks, neural communication pathways that connect different brain regions to correlate changes in these networks with their subjective experiences. Psilocybin caused profound and widespread, yet not permanent, changes to the brain's functional networks. In particular, it desynchronized the default mode network, interconnected set of brain areas that ordinarily are simultaneously active when the brain is not working on anything in particular. After falling out of sync, the network reestablished itself when the acute effects of the drugs wore off. Small differences from pre-psilocybin scans persisted for weeks. The default mode network remained stable in people who received the placebo, which was methylphenidate. So if we look at these pictures, we have some pictures of brain scans. Over here to the very left, that is a normal before treatment brain. As we can see, while they're under the effects of the psychedelics, those red areas indicate much more blood flow and heat. So there's all kinds of interconnectivity and upregulated activity. And then when we see the long term, most of the patterns look somewhat similar, and they've cooled back down to these blues, greens, and yellows. But as you can see between the two, there are actual differences in where blood flow and so, i.e., chemical and mental processes are taking place in the brain. One of the things that I think they're going to find that they found from LSD and psilocybin is part of this is a demapping or a de-imprinting function and then a re-imprinting function. I think that Dr. Timothy Leary spoke about this decades ago. One of the best things about psychedelics is they literally can help you to temporarily lose your imprint and re-imprint. And these imprints that happen to us when we are infants are oftentimes the cause of people's traumas, etc., in their life. They say normally each individual's functional brain work is as distinctive as a fingerprint. Psilocybin changed these brain networks so thoroughly that individuals could no longer be identified until the acute effects wore off. What these studies are showing is there's a lot more we have yet to know and learn about these chemicals. I'm really excited to hear, especially what the doctors, but all of my fellow correspondents have to say. This is Mathieu St. Germain on a Friday for the High at 9 News.
I'm really interested to see what the doctors say, but I'll tell you what, the trip one, I think that looks like the healthiest color activity of the brain out of the three pictures.
Well, you are, but because of the heat map, that means you are getting actually more blood flow to the brain.
See?
Then you would have
right.
a greater clearing effect and more oxygen to the brain, etc.
Look at that. Look at that, the middle.
Yeah,
Of it.
fMRI, which is a great technique to localize activity in the brain, measures magnetic resonance, which it will include blood flow as well as other activities. What's really interesting about this is the before the trip and after the trip images, and how they are very similar. So that also shows that the long-term effects are not necessarily damaging or ongoing, as a lot of people believe they might be. There's that old adage that once you take a psychedelic, then it messes with your brain permanently, and it makes you psychotic. So this sort of shows the before and after are relatively similar.
This is super, super interesting, that perspective, Dr. T. So basically, it's just like a plane. Like you take off, you have your high, and then you land, and everything goes back to normal.
Right, but if you do it right with the right intention, you may land at a better airport than you took off from.
It's like flying from Bakersfield to San Francisco.
You can't fly from Bakersfield. Unless
There you go.
We always fly private.
I understand that,
Weird.
but most people don't know you can fly.
What
out of
is there?
Bakersfield.
I want to know from the doctors. Like, there's obviously a lot more activity going on during the trip and a lot more blood flow and oxygen. Is there any issue if that's like, I don't know, over a more sustained period
Overstimulation?
than it shouldn't? Jason,
I was just asking.
how long is that much brain activity and that much blood flow to the brain safe? Like, is there any increased risk in that? I mean, like, obviously, I'm fine with LSD and I came back every time, but when do you get into the portions where you may not come back from that trip?
Well, I mean, this is showing that you do come back, and I haven't read the study. I'd love to. The question is, did they test it for a length of time? How long was the trip? What was the dose? All of these are important questions as you're looking at before and after. I'll have to read the study before I can answer that.
Jenny, I'm not a doctor, but I've been at Burning Man doing LSD, mushrooms, and MDA and 2CB for a week straight, trying to literally kill myself with psychedelics, and I remain.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? You're just fine, Matthew. There's no visible side effects.
Yeah, but Matthew, you're the immortal one, bro. You've been here since Jesus was here. So, I mean,
I would like to get a certified letter from the doctors that I am fine.
I'm not sure I'm seeing a lot of glowing things over here.
Dr. T's just going to put it on a recommendation form and send it over, so you got a clean bill of health.
He's like, you need some for whatever
company,
he's
right?
got.
Yeah. Exactly.
Very interesting skin condition.
Dr. Mark, what do you think about all this brain activity going on?
Yeah, it's really cool. You got to remember, though, that there's lots of systems and lots of things and lots of chemistry going on in the brain. Blood flow is certainly one indication around activity, because what we know with blood flow is obviously it's bringing oxygen to the cells, but it's also taking away CO2 and other respiration products. So in that sense, yes, increasing blood flow is healthy for the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But as Dr. T knows, and everybody else, is that there's all kinds of electrical signals happening in the brain. Some of those can be correlated to increase or decrease of blood flow, but they're kind of operating independent from one another. And so the electrical activity that these things have in the brain is a fact that at the synapse, there's basically an electrical junction where charge is built up. And when that synapse fires, there's actually an electrical charge that goes across that gap. So it would be also equally interesting to look at blood flow as look at brainwave and other indications around, that sense of normalcy. So yes, blood flow, you'd say here's before and here's after, and here's in between. This is what Matt looks like all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's on this eternal trip. And then here's the rest of the population. We're all normal. But I think that what we do know is the receptors that these things act on, like 5-HT and whatnot, that they're related to a lot of different other activities that are in the brain. So while blood flow is important, also electrical brainwave activity and other things might be, again, curious to look at. It's kind of like just looking at like the oil level in your engine. There's lots of other things that you may want to look at as well as just looking at the oil.
Like your tire pressure, huh, Dr. Mark?
Tire pressure, yeah. Whether you got gasoline in the car,
yeah.
Whether all your, electrical contacts are making contact. And certainly I think what happens in the brain, there is kind of like a rewiring, Matt, right? That happens after
Yes, sir.
After the psychedelic experience. They attribute that to something called neuroplasticity.
Yeah, neuroplasticity. Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Very good, Jason.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So think of it like that, like how your brain responds to certain stimuli and how your brain kind of resets itself after the application of said stimuli. So
Yes, Doctor. And Dr. Timothy Leary did amazing work on this. And, and he was really probably one of the greatest philosophers, scientists, priests of the 20th century and maybe even several hundred years. Currently, a lot of his work has been obscured by mainstream media and the government demonizing him with his turn on, tune in, drop out, which really he was right on about the whole thing. I'm going to dial into it. What he talks about is imprinting, and he gives the example of like you can imprint a duck an orange basketball, and that duck will prefer that orange basketball to its own mother that can give its life because of that real very delicate moment when the organism is designed to see its parental figure and imprint on it. And it's not just imprinting who your parents is, it's imprinting your attachment style, which you can Google attachment style, I won't go into it, and these other things that really form who you are as a person. And one of the things that Leary supposed, and it seems like with some of the MRI and fMRI readouts that we're getting, is that the psychedelics kind of open up the mapping pathways and smooth out these grooves that we've created through imprinting and habit. And now, if someone does it without intention or with mixed use of drugs, or they aren't really paying attention, it could get a benefit or not. But when you really slow down, do it the right way with intention, have a great opportunity to actually re-imprint your system and basically rewrite your own operating software so that you interface with the world in a more positive manner. And I think that's what this study is even showing too, is we have this normal brain usage. All of a sudden there's a flurry of activity. The entire brain's lit up. And then there's just slight alterations in brain activity in the post-trip scan.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really something that points to, like, and if we can see, and I think not just the RNC, but the DNC and all these people who are caught in these two tribes and these main buckets of mainstream America, if we really dial down, and I see it when I'm talking to everybody and trying to offer them visions of a different future, everyone is really stuck in fear. Fear of what is, fear of what was, fear of what will be. The message that they keep broadcasting from themselves subconsciously without even realizing it, that it's never going to change. It's always been this way, which is another message rooted out of fear and the will to safety. What I would counter with is the more people that do these mushrooms, especially with intention and in a community structured manner, maybe we'll have a chance to get off of this fear trip, because if we continue down this road, it doesn't look good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the way through this is for us to disregard our fear and stand up as warriors together in love, grab the hands of the people around us, and model the best behavior so that we actually can change what is going on in our country and in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm high, you guys.
No.
I have a question. I have a quick question before we move on, you guys. But Dr. T and Dr. Mark, they say that the average person only uses 10% of their brain power. So by taking psychedelics, and we see all of this brain activity going on, does that mean that you are using more than 10% of your brain power at that time?
Well, tell me what brain power is, and I'll answer the question. There's no RPMs for brain. There's brain.
There's not a thought per second speed.
No.
Well, there should be. Maybe a thought per minute for some people, but.
Oh, wow.
I also want to point that this method that they use, fMRI, is really, if you consider set and setting as important, this is in a tube, that's
Right.
claustrophobic tube. So, just take it with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I have a question for Matthew. Who did your makeup today?
That was me, Dr. Mark. I make all of these visuals myself. I spend a lot of free time when I'm not working out or walking around outside making fractals and different visuals, and maybe I need help, you guys. I don't know.
It's all right. We all know he does.
I'd say I'm slightly obsessed.
Speaking
I
of
can't
help,
tell if you're a black man or if you're white. So it kind of removes.
I'm actually 6% Sub-Saharan African, 2.3% Neanderthal, and the remainder Iberian.
speaking of help, we're going to call a doctor to the room because we definitely need a doctor for all of this.